Consider This, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the UNO television studios, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
And welcome back to Consider This. We're not in our usual place over at the Student Center, the Milo Bale Student Center in the Fireside Pit, because our expensive equipment couldn't be moved in the rush of snow piling up. So this week, I am in the studio at KYNE TV studios, and Steve Acapulco is with me. He is the chairman of the Democratic Party in Nebraska. Now, you're looking a lot happier than you were a year and about a quarter ago that you were on this show for the first time.
Well, it feels like it was about 10 years ago. It really does, because there's a lot of things that have happened to the Nebraska Democratic Party, and I think to the National Democratic Party. So we were certainly down and out a year and a half ago because we had gotten clobbered in the midterm elections in 2002. But we've done a lot of things with our party in the meantime, and we're looking forward to a much more successful campaign this year.
We'll look a little more locally, statewide in a second, but obviously the thing that is creating some excitement right now is a pretty active and not too snarpy Democratic primary. And by the time we're taping this, we've gone through the first two waves. If you want to call the Iowa caucuses in New Hampshire the first wave, and then the next set of 7 caucuses and primaries. And John Kerry seems to be, well, he's got the wind in his sails.
He's doing very well, but as we speak, there are at least 4 candidates that are still in the race, 4 great candidates. And the thing that is really invigorating is the quality of the debate that has occurred in the Democratic primaries and really the lead up to the Democratic primaries. The other thing that I think is important is that there's an urgency amongst Democrats in this election, the likes of which I have never seen in my lifetime. And that urgency is to send George Bush packing back to Crawford, Texas, because of his radical policies and all of the things that people have heard about in the media, from the war to all of the domestic problems and the mishandling of various situations.
Well, the polls are certainly showing that, they do those, if you were to vote today for Bush against, let's say, John Kerry, that Kerry has a very, very slim lead. That means that George Bush's popularity, as we actually think of voting again, might be eroding. But you say that everybody wants him, well, all the Democrats want him out. But I think America's a little schizophrenic right now about, they're concerned about jobs, they're concerned about certain things and would lean maybe towards the Democrats. But certainly issues that have been divisive and now are becoming more divisive, such as abortion, gay and lesbian marriages, which has popped up because of the Massachusetts court ruling. Those things tend to galvanize people in a totally different way, that are more one-issue, two-issue people.
Well, they certainly do, but consider this. On September 11th, 2001, the entire world and certainly the citizens of our country fell behind George Bush. His popularity figures were absolutely out of sight. He had the world by a string, and nobody could conceive that any Democrat could mount a strong challenge to him, even in 2004. The last polling shows that Kerry is ahead of Bush head-to-head by 5 or 6 points. It also shows that John Edwards is running ahead of George Bush by 1 or 2 points. And certainly those numbers are going to change perhaps radically between now and the election. But what it shows is a great dissatisfaction out there by a large number of people concerning George Bush's policies.
It's still fluid. It's still really fluid because a lot of things can happen between now and November. We're talking about there could be some more job growth than the president had hoped for. They could catch Osama bin Laden, which would, I think, is a psychological as well as realistic great thing for people, just in general. There's all kinds of things that can happen. And I think the issues that you're looking to hone in on. Well, why don't you tell me what you think as the Democratic Party tries to find its voice again? What those things are?
I think people who have been listening to the media have a general idea about that. But certainly, the war on Iraq and foreign policy in general is going to be a major issue. We have the weapons of mass destruction issue. But not just that. It's the way this administration has put its thumb in the eye of the United Nations, of the French, of the Germans, and the Russians in the face of any kind of criticism for what this administration wants to do. It's the fact that we now have what appears to be an intelligence failure, and certainly there's a lot more to come out on that. But what's happened to date is impairing the credibility of this country abroad when we deal with Chinese and show them our intelligence on the issue of North Korea. We're losing, as we speak, credibility in our foreign affairs with other countries. Since Bush was elected, we have lost 3 million jobs in this country. We have lost 2.5 million jobs in the manufacturing sector alone. There are still, as we speak, more manufacturing jobs going out of this country than we can shake a stick at. We have George Bush was handed by President Clinton a record budget surplus in the federal budget of $200 and some odd billion. We now have a $510 billion shortfall in our budget, and it appears, and those are Bush's numbers, it appears that those numbers are somewhat phony because he's not even budgeting for any money to go to Iraq after July or August. Now, what's that about? This administration, we can talk about given issues, but there's one thread that runs through this administration. They're losing credibility. People don't believe them anymore, and that's one major theme of our party. There's been a basic failure of this administration in virtually every respect except paying off the special interests that elected them. And if there's another theme that runs through this administration, it is that they take care of their special interests. And you can point to a number of things, how they've rolled back environmental standards, the obscene tax cuts that they now want to make permanent, and on and on and on we go. There are just a whole flurry of issues out there.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those. You've mentioned a lot of things, and I asked you to.
Well, let's have it.
I asked you to.
Let's have at it, because this is, it's the issues that are inspiring Democrats now, and it's the issues that we want people to focus on.
Well, the issues are jobs. I don't think that's a question, especially in many states where they have lost huge numbers of manufacturing jobs. But in the discussion that I'm hearing, and I listen to a lot of the Democratic debates, whenever I'm home, I make a point just to hear what they're coming up with, how it's gelling, how it's molding. And I hear something like, John Edwards will say, we want, are against free trade, we want fair trade.
Correct.
Well, that's easy to say, but, people wonder if, can we abandon NAFTA? Can we, how can we fix this thing that Bill Clinton helped push? By the way, the NAFTA treaty.
There are Democrats who are on both sides of that issue, but at least the Democrats are debating that issue. This administration is ignoring that issue. It is a serious issue. We have a serious trade deficit. And as I just said, we're losing jobs hand over fist, and maybe it's time that we take another look at NAFTA. But at least the Democrats are debating that difficult issue. The Republicans are pretty much ignoring that issue. George Bush has said we're not going to revisit it, but Democrats, particularly Gephardt and Edwards, are addressing the issues. And I think Howard Dean is calling for some revisiting of our bilateral trade relationships, maybe requiring as a condition in those agreements certain working standards, certain wage standards, and so forth. We need to start looking at those issues. At least the Democrats are looking at that prospect.
And Democrats have always been associated with jobs in terms of the sense that Democrats have always fought for jobs. They've fought for things related to jobs like
That's because
safety.
The Democrats represent the ordinary folks.
Now, that's a good question these days, because I read a quote in this week's Newsweek by Robert Reich. He's a former labor secretary to Bill Clinton. He said, the Democratic Party doesn't really exist as a quote-unquote party. The Republicans have a party in terms of a disciplined organization that not only recruits, supports, and develops candidates, but also maintains itself between elections, has dedicated funding sources, and has a system of developing and maintaining a consistent message. So whether you have had a consistent message in years past, I don't know if people can say the Republicans stand for this and the Democrats stand for that anymore.
Well,
maybe this election is helping.
I think that what you're seeing to some extent now in the primary process is a winnowing process to define that message. But compare the Democrats' message now to the Democrats' message back in the 2002 elections. Our party had no message at that point in time. We were going along with the administration on the war, on their economic policies. Most Democrats were voting for these tax cuts and so on and so forth. Now, we can select the issues. We can the war, the economic issues of Bush, a whole scheme of other domestic issues, from what's happening to our civil liberties to what's happening to our civil rights to environmental rollbacks, and to this whole idea that this administration seems to put their thumb in the eye of anybody that wants to dissent from any of their policies. Bush is almost ruling, as we discussed previously, and I hesitate to say this because it's a bit of an exaggeration, but one thing that characterizes this administration is ruling out of fear. And this country cannot be governed by the law of fear.
Explain what you mean by that. Are you saying that we are fearful of not thinking the way George Bush thinks, and the conservatives and the neoconservatives, or what do you mean by that?
I mean that when Democrats criticize the war, Dick Herman has just written a wonderful editorial in NebraskaStatePaper.com where he talks about this. When the war was being debated, any Democrat that questioned the administration, not any Democrat, but some Democrats, were being called unpatriotic. Tom Daschle, when he dared to raise objections, was being called unpatriotic, and the specter of the overstatements were being made about Saddam Hussein and the threat that he posed. That's one example.
Okay,
another example is the use of religion in governing, and we're seeing that now to some extent with the gay marriage issue, and it shouldn't be labeled that. It's really a question of whether gays and lesbians should have the same rights that you and I do. But the Bush administration has a tendency to introduce religion into the equation and to suggest that Democrats, because they believe in things like equal rights for gays and lesbians, are somehow not as religious or not as in close to as in touch with God as the Republicans are. It's those kinds of things that I mean when I talk about the role of fear. I'm also talking about the sign that exists in Karl Rove's office. He's the principal political advisor to President Bush, that says, it's the war, stupid, suggestive of their view that they can win an election if they can effectively employ the issue of the war to their benefit, which, and we just relive, the Democrats are reliving what happened in 2002, where that issue was really parlayed into a great victory of the Republicans. And it's high time that Democrats stand up and say, we're not going to take that anymore. There are legitimate criticisms that should be leveled at this administration. Our country was founded on the right to dissent, and we intend to dissent.
There's one thing that seems clear when you look at Republicans. You can go down the list of things like the Patriot Act, gay and lesbian marriage, as it's called, anti-abortion, and people know what the Democrats stand for.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
you mean the Republicans?
Excuse me, the Republicans. And then the Democrats, I know that the Democrats have always been able to agree to disagree. For instance, on abortion. There are many very strong pro-life people in the Democratic Party, and there are those that believe in choice. That maybe this gay and lesbian union marriage thing is going to agree to disagree. And some people consider that In fact, if you listen to some of the conservative talk show hosts, that if you don't have a position on something, you're weak, and you're namby-pamby, therefore you don't stand for anything.
Well, it could also be that Democrats are more tolerant than Republicans. Tolerant in the sense that there's room for diversity in our society, which is another democratic value that we promote. I don't think there was a big flap over affirmative action, and the whole Trent Lott situation, I think, points up the fact that Democrats tend to be in favor of diversity, equal opportunity in education and employment right down the line, and Republicans don't. Democrats tend to be more tolerant, and this is one of the things I think we want to talk about is the Nebraska Democratic Party. But one of the hard questions that we've asked ourselves is, are we an appropriately diverse Nebraska Democratic Party? And the answer is no. And the answer is no right now. And we're about the business of trying to correct that. We're creating an African American caucus, which will have an institutional relationship with the Nebraska Democratic Party. Same with respect to a Hispanic caucus. Same with respect to a gay and lesbian caucus. We already have a women's caucus. You know that my wife is involved with a group called the
Democratic Divas.
And that's all with an effort, which is particularly important in this state where Republicans, there are a lot more Republicans than Democrats. It's to bring in under our umbrella a lot more people. And unless we do that, we're not going to be successful. But we've got our eye on that ball.
You talk about diversity. The Republicans have been trying to stake out the Latino or Hispanic population, whatever you want to call it, because historically, when you go back to the people that left Cuba, that those really strong Republican contingents, and they're trying to lay claim on issues like abortion, gay and lesbian marriages, because most Latinos come from the Roman Catholic background and have very strong feelings because of how they were brought up and their religious beliefs. Are the Hispanics going to be wrapped up by the Republicans?
Well, I think the Democratic Party is as I mentioned, the party of equal opportunity, much more so than the Republicans. The party of jobs, the party of the bread and butter issues, education, health care, very important. Those are the issues that the Latinos are concentrating on. The other thing I think that's happening is the Latinos are becoming much more sophisticated. Not that they haven't always been, but much more sophisticated in understanding what some of the tactics that are political tactics that are being employed upon them by both parties. Take what George Bush just did with regard to his announcement that he wants to go to Mars, directly aimed at Texas, where there's a huge space industry, directly aimed at Florida, where there's an absolutely huge space industry, clearly a political ploy. I've had Hispanics come up to me and say, "What's that all about?" Take the other thing that
it might just be trying to put Americans.
I didn't get my other one out there.
Okay.
The immigration reform proposal.
I was going to get to that anyway.
He proposes a 3-year in effect amnesty, which is clearly intended to benefit the big businesses that need this kind of cheap labor, but he isn't willing to build into his proposal a ticket into a permanent ticket into the United States for the workers that he's willing to grant this 3-year amnesty to, and it's
like a permanent
cynical.
guest worker program.
It's a cynical program.
But
now,
he's got very conservative people nailing him from the other side.
Where was Bush at, though? If there's not a political issue behind that, where was he at back in 2001 when he was elected? Where was that at in 2002? Where was that proposal at in 2003?
But that was somewhat. They were talking about a proposal. He and Vicente Fox, the president of Mexico, were talking, and then 9/11 hit. I mean, it was on his agenda. It was on his agenda at that time.
I think,
to be fair,
I think it's a legitimate question to bring up the timing of these various proposals that are clearly aimed at courting the Hispanic vote. I think Hispanics will look beyond that, and they're going to look to jobs. They're going to look to health care. They're going to look to education and basic issues where the Democrats hold the high ground.
Okay, let's talk about Nebraska. I know you're pretty proud of some of the things that you're doing. And one of the things you're doing is reacting to what the Democrats have been criticized for, and that's a lack of organization.
Correct.
They always had the hand for years and years on the grassroots mobilization.
Right.
And now at least in Nebraska you're doing some things. And of course those DENIACs maybe are giving hope that you can wrangle a lot of people together and get them moving in one direction.
We talked about what things were like in 2002. We were really badly organized then. Since we talked a year and a half ago, we've hired a new executive director who is a political professional from Maryland who has gotten rave reviews out here for what he's done. He was he's a confidant of Paris Glendening, the former governor of Maryland. He effectively ran Kathleen Kennedy Townsend's campaign back in 2002. He's been an assistant secretary of labor in Maryland. He's got great contacts with the labor people.
What about agriculture?
He's getting into agriculture. In fact, he's focusing on that, I believe, as we speak. But he's come into our party and taken a hard look, and we hired him because we had one aim, and that was to hire the best person that we could out there, whether from Nebraska or otherwise, to run our party. And the whole idea is to raise the level of professionalism in our party. We started with one principle. We want to create a standalone, self-sufficient, highly professional organization here in Nebraska that will be immune to the comings and goings of people like Bob Kerrey, which really hurt us because Bob Kerrey was very generous to the Nebraska Democratic Party.
And he was part of the soul of the Democratic
Correct.
Party during that period, much as J.J. Exon was part of the soul when he was.
That's correct. And
governor.
the whole idea is to build an organization that is strong enough to withstand those kinds of temporary things. We have completely upgraded our technology. We have, from our computers to our software to our voter file, which is an essential asset of a state party, which helps candidates and helps the party with its messaging and all of the rest. We are out there in the media. I think anybody that observed what we did with regard to state government and the budget problems that were happening last year saw us out there actively promoting democratic ideas. We're still doing the same thing. And you know, we're creating these caucuses, and we've established a forum series for the Hispanics and for the African Americans, so that these issues that affect these groups can be discussed. We're doing all of that. We've hired 3 or 4 more people since I last spoke to you.
And one
We've
thing that has
increased
happened.
our fundraising. We're real energetic now. We've got, as you can tell, I'm real excited about this.
Yeah.
But, and right now we're trying to throw our arms around it. We're raising more money.
So Nebraska Democrats, those that have been with you sort of in the long haul, don't have to feel like lone soldiers anymore.
We are working our tails off.
Throwing sacrificial lambs against Republicans in
No.
elections, which happened for quite a while.
Let's talk about that. One of the byproducts, I think, of our efforts and our visibility and all that we've talked about is, in this upcoming election, take the races for the congressional race.
Well, first you are
the
thanking
congressional-
Doug B. Ryder every day that he's not running again.
We have,
I'm sure.
wow, what a difference a year and a half makes. In the first district, Doug B. Ryder is not running. So first of all, we have an open district there for the first time in, 25 years? And we have 2, not 1, but 2 outstanding candidates that are running in a contested Democratic primary. We've got an outstanding state legislator who's running, Matt Keneally, in that district, has been elected now twice from one of the most conservative areas he's from Decatur, up in the Tekamah, Nebraska area, for your viewers. He's a farmer, a businessman, a fiscal conservative, but a real good mainstream Democrat.
And your other candidate?
And our other candidate is Janet Stewart, who is a lawyer at Mutual of Omaha. She lives in Fremont, who is just an outstanding candidate as well.
Can you raise money for them or help them raise money? I know it's incumbent on them to raise money, but one of the things that the Democrats have, I guess, suffered from, if you want to use it, is that they didn't even have a prayer from a financial point of view.
Actually, those two are doing a pretty decent job of raising money. But I'll tell you this: in that race, there's no way we're going to be able to outraise the Republicans because, you know, they've got access to special interest money that we don't. But in terms of working, we're gonna work our tails off. The other thing that's happened in that race that's interesting is we're just coming off of a very competitive race in the Lincoln City elections for city council people and for the mayor, where the Democrats were very successful. And so there's some organization down there in Lincoln, which is really the center of the first district. And some bodies and people and some organization that's put together that's going to help whoever emerges in that race.
The first district, you have Nancy Thompson, Senator Nancy Thompson.
Second district.
Second. I always get. I guess it's an Omahan thinking we're number one. Okay, it's a bad thing. It's bad on me. But in the second district, you have Senator Nancy Thompson running against Lee Terry.
Correct.
And she looks, on paper, pretty, you know, the strongest candidate you've had against a Republican incumbent in a long time.
She's raised more money than anyone since, I believe, Peter Hoagland did when he was a sitting congressman. And she may well raise more as this race unfolds. But there again, you have an outstanding state senator, a great mainstream Democrat from one of the most conservative areas of her congressional district, out in the Papillion area. She's been very popular as a state senator amongst Republicans and Democrats. And I think she's going to take a lot of Republican and independent votes away from Lee Terry. Now, in that race, I doubt that she will raise as much money as Lee Terry will, but there again, I you know, depending on, you're going to have a presidential contest. We have this year. We have a lot more equal.
So voter turnout is going to be key.
We have a lot more of an equal. We're on more equal footing in terms of voter registration in this district.
And we just have 30 seconds left. If there's a competitive national election, that will help get more Democrats and independents out for your congressional.
And we're, in terms of our recruiting in other areas, state legislative candidates and local candidates, we're doing as much as we can to get that turnout up. That's our real job.
Well, you can see Steve Acapulco is excited about the future of the Democratic Party here in Nebraska and across the country. This fall, we'll have him in the Republican chair head to head just before the November elections. Join us then.
Thank you very much. Nice to see you.
To view this edition of Consider This or past programs, visit our website at unotv.unomaha.edu. For comments or questions, call 402-554-2516 during regular business hours. Consider This is a production of UNO Television.